A bobcat stole an old man's seat, then left something that changed everything. What looked like a rude stunt on a crowded bus turns into the start of a dangerous chain reaction. A quiet bystander who dared to speak up suddenly finds himself caught in something far bigger than a viral video. Hidden inside that seat is a secret no one was supposed to find, one that points to power, corruption, and a risk that could put lives on the line. Now, with enemies watching and threats closing in, he has to decide: walk away and stay safe, or fight back against forces that could crush him. But what was the Bobcat really trying to do? And why does the secret have the power to change not just one life but everything? Before we start, take a moment to comment your name or city. It's my way of remembering that behind each play is a real heartbeat. The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of the number 47 West Hill City bus as it lurched along its familiar route toward campus. Hollis Vega stood near, the back, one hand gripping the metal pole, his work uniform still carrying the lingering scent of hash browns and coffee from his early morning shift at Pete's Diner. The bus was packed tight with students, their backpacks and morning chatter filling the confined space. At the next stop, Hollis noticed an elderly man attempting to board. Clem Dwyer, his weathered face familiar from countless morning rides, carefully maneuvered his cane onto the first step. The bus driver waited patiently, but some of the students shuffled impatiently, checking their phones and muttering about being late to class. Hollis watched as Clem made his way slowly up the steps, his line face tight with concentration. The veteran's progress was steady but careful, each movement deliberate as he balanced with his cane. The priority seats at the front, marked with clear blue signs showing a cane and wheelchair symbol, were already occupied by students who seemed absorbed in their phones. Just as Clem reached the top step, a commotion erupted from the back of the line. The university's Bobcat mascot, still in full costume minus the head, pushed forward through the crowd. The tall figure in the furry blue and white suit shouldered past Clem, nearly causing the older man to lose his balance. "Hey, watch it," someone called out, but the mascot ignored them, dropping heavily into one of the priority seats and immediately pulling out a phone, the furry costume arms awkwardly manipulating the screen. Hollis felt his jaw tighten as he watched Clem struggle to maintain his footing, the older man's dignity evident in his straight spine despite the slight tremor in his hands on the cane. The bus lurched forward, and Clem swayed dangerously. "Excuse me," Hollis said, his quiet voice carrying in the sudden hush. "That's a priority seat. This gentleman needs it." He gestured toward Clem, who stood silently, his eyes forward. The mascot looked up, the person inside barely visible through the neck of the costume. "I've got a performance in 10 minutes. I'm exhausted from practice. He can take the next bus." A few students nearby shifted uncomfortably, but no one else spoke up. Hollis felt his face grow warm, but he stepped forward anyway. "Sir," he addressed Clem directly, "please take my spot." "I'll stand." "That's not right," Clem replied, his voice steady but tired. "Those seats are marked for a reason." The mascot made an exaggerated show of slouching further into the seat. "Look, I pay tuition here. I've got rights too." Something in Hollis snapped. Maybe it was the early morning griddle burns on his arms, or the weight of countless mornings watching people pretend not to see what was right in front of them. "Get up," he said, louder now. "You're breaking the law and showing complete disrespect to a veteran who served this country." The bus had grown silent except for the whir of phones recording the confrontation. The mascot stood up suddenly, the costume head under one arm. "You trying to start something? Who do you think you are? The bus police?" "I'm someone who knows right from wrong," Hollis replied, his voice shaking slightly but determined. "And this is wrong." By now, several passengers had their phones out, recording the exchange. The mascot, realizing they were being filmed, grudgingly moved aside, muttering something about social justice warriors under their breath. Clem carefully made his way to the now vacant priority seat, nodding briefly to Hollis. "Thank you, son," he said quietly, but his eyes held a wealth of meaning. The rest of the ride passed in tense silence, but Hollis could see people typing furiously on their phones. By the time he got off at his stop, he had almost forgotten about the incident, his mind already on his afternoon shift. It wasn't until his break for hours later that Hollis realized something was wrong. His phone, usually silent except for his sister's occasional text, was buzzing constantly. Notifications poured in from social media platforms he barely used. The video had gone viral. Different versions of the confrontation were spreading across multiple platforms. Some praised him as a defender of veterans' rights, while others painted him as an aggressive bully who had humiliated a student just trying to do their job. Local news stations were already picking up the story, with headlines like "Bus Confrontation Divides Campus Community" and "Short Order Cook Takes Stand on Priority Seating." Hollis sat in the break room, his untouched cup of coffee growing cold. As he scrolled through the comments, some people had already figured out where he worked, posting reviews about Pete's Diner that had nothing to do with the food. Others were calling for boycotts of the university's mascot program. The simple act of standing up for what was right had somehow sparked a social media firestorm. His manager, Pete, stuck his head into the break room. "Hey, Hollis, there's some reporters outside asking for you. Want me to tell them to beat it?" Hollis rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. "Yes, please. I just want to do my job." But as the afternoon wore on, it became clear that wouldn't be possible. Every time the diner's door opened, someone would point and whisper. Customers tried to secretly film him at the grill. His quiet life of routine bus rides and steady work had been suddenly thrust into an unwanted spotlight, all because he'd refused to stay silent in the face of wrongdoing. By closing time, the video had over 100,000 views, and local news vans were parked outside the diner. Hollis slipped out the back door, taking the long way home to avoid any cameras. As he walked, his phone continued to buzz with notifications, each one a reminder that his simple act of standing up for what was right had somehow turned into something much bigger than he'd ever intended. The morning after the viral incident, Hollis arrived early for his usual bus route, hoping to avoid attention. The familiar sight of Clem Dwyer waiting at the stop made him pause. The elderly man was examining something in his weathered hands. "Morning, Mr. Dwyer," Hollis said quietly, approaching the bench. "Everything okay?" Clem looked up, his expression troubled. "That mascot yesterday. They left something behind." He held up a bright yellow rally towel, the university's Bobcat logo emblazoned across it. "Found it wedged in the seat after they left. But there's more." Hollis sat beside him as Clem carefully unfolded the towel. Inside was a small silver locker, key attached to a numbered tag, and beneath it, a folded piece of paper. The note was typed in plain black text. "For the man with the cane. This was meant for you," Hollis asked, feeling a chill despite the warm morning. "Seems that way." Clem's fingers tightened around his cane. "The keys for the campus recreation center. I recognize the tag style. Used to do safety inspections there years ago." Hollis checked his watch. His shift didn't start for 3 hours. "Would you like me to go with you to check it out?" Clem studied him for a long moment. "You've already stuck your neck out once for me. This could be nothing, or it could be trouble." "All the more reason you shouldn't go alone," Hollis said firmly. The recreation center was quiet when they arrived. Most students still asleep or in early classes. Their footsteps echoed in the locker room as they followed the numbers down the rows. Locker 147 looked exactly like all the others, plain gray metal with a simple lock. Clem's hands shook slightly as he inserted the key. The lock clicked open. Inside, they found a USB flash drive and what appeared to be an accounting ledger, its black cover unmarked. Hollis glanced around the empty locker room before carefully removing them. "We should look at these somewhere private," he whispered. They found an empty study room in the library's basement. Hollis plugged the flash drive into his phone while Clem opened the ledger. Pages of handwritten numbers and coded entries filled the book. "These are cash transfers," Clem murmured, running his finger down a column. "Large ones, all marked with different animal names: beaver, eagle, tiger, eagle, tiger." Mascots, Hollis realized, looking up from his phone screen. Different university mascots. "And look at this." He turned his phone to show Clem the photos he found on the drive. They showed various mascot costume heads, but not as they appeared at games. These were cut open, revealing hollow compartments filled with white pill bottles. "Prescription labels," Clem noted, squinting at the image. "But I'd bet those aren't legal prescriptions." Hollis felt his stomach twist. Yesterday on the bus, that wasn't just about a seat, was it? They were trying to get your attention, to get this information to you specifically. Question is, why me? Clem closed the ledger carefully. "I'm just a retired inspector who made some enemies by doing my job properly." Unless he trailed off, lost in thought. Unless what? Unless someone remembered I was the one who reported safety violations in the recreation center's construction 15 years ago. Violations that were mysteriously dismissed after the contractor made some generous donations to the university. Hollis looked again at the photos of the mascot heads, the careful documentation of cash movements. "This is bigger than a rude person on a bus, isn't it?" "Much bigger," Clem agreed grimly. "Someone's using the mascot program to move drugs between schools, and for some reason, they wanted us to know about it." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their discovery settling over them. The ledger and flash drive seemed to radiate danger on the table between them. "What do we do now?" Hollis finally asked. "We need to be careful," Clem replied, gathering the items with deliberate movements. If this information is real, there are people who won't want it exposed. That viral video yesterday, it might have been more than just bad behavior. It might have been a test to see if you'd speak up. Hollis thought about his quiet life at the diner, the simple routine he'd built for himself. That life felt very far away now, replaced by something darker and more complicated. But looking at Clem's determined face, he knew he couldn't walk away. They split up before leaving the library, agreeing to meet later to discuss their next steps. Hollis watched the elderly man make his way slowly across the campus quad, the cane tapping steadily against the pavement, the dangerous evidence tucked safely in his coat pocket. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grass, and Hollis couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, in those shadows, someone was watching them both. Hollis stood at the campus police station's front desk, the flash drive and ledger feeling heavy in his jacket pocket. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as a bored-looking officer barely glanced up from his computer screen. "Sir, without concrete proof of a crime, there's nothing we can investigate," the officer said flatly. "Photos of masked heads and some numbers in a book aren't evidence of anything illegal. But the cash transfers Hollis started could be legitimate business dealings." The officer cut him off with a wave. "Look, if you're worried about the masked incident, that's already been handled internally by the athletics department." Hollis felt his face grow warm with frustration. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of a framed photo on the wall. Diana Kincaid shaking hands with the police chief at a charity event. His heart sank. Outside the station, Clem waited on a bench, leaning on his cane. The morning sun cast long shadows across the campus lawn. As Hollis approached, shaking his head in defeat, Clem's weathered face tightened with concern. "No luck?" the older man asked. "They wouldn't even look at it," Hollis replied, dropping onto the bench beside him. Clem opened his mouth to respond but suddenly went still, his eyes fixed on something over Hollis's shoulder. "Don't turn around quickly," he murmured, "but that white Kincaid construction truck has been following us since we left the station." Hollis casually stretched, using the motion to glance behind them. The truck was parked across the street, its driver pretending to check something on a clipboard. "This isn't the first time I've dealt with Diana's tactics," Clem said quietly, his voice thick with old anger. 20 years ago, I was city inspector when she first started cutting corners. Found rusted support beams in one of her apartment complexes. She'd used substandard materials to save money. Could have killed dozens of families. What happened? I filed reports. Lots of them. But she had friends in high places even then. Next thing I knew, I was transferred to parking enforcement. Clem's knuckles whitened around his cane. A month later, that building passed inspection under someone else's watch. The truck's engine rumbled to life. Hollis watched in the reflection of a nearby window as it slowly cruised past them. "We need help," Clem said firmly. "Someone who knows how to get information out there, who can't be easily silenced." A slight smile crossed his face, "And I know just the person." 20 minutes later, they sat in a cramped radio booth at the campus station. Laurel Dwyer, Clem's granddaughter, stood before them with arms crossed, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of their story. Her student ID badge hung from a lanyard around her neck, catching the light from the on-air sign in the next room. "So that's why you've been dodging my calls, Grandpa?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because you're investigating construction, corruption, and drug trafficking. Would you have preferred I told you over the phone?" Clem replied with a hint of mischief. Laurel ran a hand through her short dark hair, thinking, "The timing makes sense. Kincaid's behind schedule on the stadium expansion, and the boosters are getting antsy. If she's cutting corners again, she is," Clem insisted. "And someone's using the Mascot program to move something illegal through the construction site. The question is, what do we do about it?" Hollis asked, glancing nervously at the window. "They're watching us now." Laurel's eyes lit up with determination. "That's exactly why we need to act fast. I produce an investigative segment that airs weekly. We may not have enough yet for the police, but we can start asking questions publicly. Make it harder for them to sweep this under the rug. It'll be dangerous," Clem warned, looking at his granddaughter with concern. "So is letting them get away with it," Laurel countered. She turned to Hollis. "Are you in? Once we start this, there's no going back." Hollis thought about the viral video, how quickly his quiet life had already been upended. But he also thought about those pill canisters, about Clem's story of the apartment building, about how many people could get hurt if they did nothing. "I'm in," he said firmly. "Then let's get to work," Laurel replied, pulling out her recorder. "First, we need to document everything you've found so far. Then we'll start digging deeper. If Diana Kincaid thinks she can intimidate us into silence, she's about to learn otherwise." Through the booth's window, They could see the same white truck circling the building again. But this time, instead of feeling afraid, Hollis felt something different, determination. They weren't alone anymore. And sometimes the best defense against powerful enemies was to shine a light on the truth. Clem reached over and squeezed his granddaughter's hand, pride evident in his eyes. Just like your mother, he said softly. She never could walk away from a fight that needed fighting either. Laurel squeezed back, then straightened her shoulders. All right, let's get this on record. Start from the beginning. Tell me about the bus incident, and don't leave anything out. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the campus radio station windows as Hollis, Clem, and Laurel finished documenting their evidence. A soft knock at the door made them all jump. Hello? A hesitant female voice called through the door. I need to speak with Hollis Vega. They exchanged wary glances. Laurel moved to block the door while Clem gripped his cane tighter. Hollis stepped forward, his heart pounding. Who is it? He asked. My name is Rowan Pike. The voice replied. I was the one in the Bobcat costume. Silence fell over the room. Laurel looked to her grandfather, who nodded slowly. She opened the door to reveal a young woman in her early 20s, thin and athletic, with worried eyes and trembling hands. I've been following you since the police station, Rowan said, stepping inside and quickly closing the door. I had to make sure. You were alone before I could approach. You're the one who caused all this trouble, Clem asked, his voice more curious than angry. Rowan nodded, wringing her hands. I chose that bus deliberately. I've been watching for weeks, trying to find the right person. She looked directly at Hollis. Someone who would actually do something when they saw wrong being done. You were watching me, Hollis asked, stunned. Every morning for 2 weeks, I saw how you helped people with their bags. Gave up your seat without being asked, always thanked the driver. Rowan's voice grew stronger. I needed someone decent, someone who couldn't be bought. But why the whole show? Laurel pressed. Why not just hand over the evidence directly? Because they're watching everything. Rowan explained, her fear evident. Coach Merrick has people everywhere. If they'd seen me approach Hollis directly, she shuddered. The viral video gave me cover. Everyone thought it was just about a rude mascot. Nobody looked deeper. Hollis sat down heavily in a nearby chair. You planned all of this? All of this? I had to, Rowan said, her voice breaking. The things I've seen, Coach Merrick and Diana Kincaid. They're not just cutting corners on the stadium. The drug running through the mascot program. The bribes, the threats, it's all connected. But I couldn't go to the police. Kincaid owns half the force. How do you know all this? Clem asked gently. I'm on an athletic scholarship. Last year, I caught Coach Merrick meeting with Kincaid late at night in the locker rooms. They were arguing about delivery schedules and payment drops. Rowan wrapped her arms around herself. They saw me. Coach Merrick said he'd revoke my scholarship if I ever breathe a word. But I couldn't just stay quiet. Not when people could die if that stadium collapses. Hollis watched the young woman, seeing both terror and determination in her stance. She'd risked everything to get the truth out, choosing him as her unlikely champion. The weight of that trust settled on his shoulders. What exactly did you see in those meetings? He asked quietly. Enough to prove they're working together, Rowan replied. Coach Merrick provides cover through the mascot program, we're allowed. Everywhere on campus, no questions asked. Perfect for moving packages in return. Kincaid funnels money into his recruiting fund through fake construction contracts. That's why the stadium project keeps going over budget, Laurel realized. Her producer's instincts kicking in. Yes, but the real danger is in the shortcuts. I've seen the original plans versus what's actually being built. The differences. Rowan shook her head. When they pack that stadium for the home opener next month, it won't hold. Clem finished grimly. Hollis stood up, his decision made. Then we stop them before that happens. You'll help, Rowan asked, hope breaking through. Her fear, even knowing how dangerous they are. You trusted me to do the right thing, Hollis replied. I'm not going to let you down now. Tears welled in Rowan's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. I was so scared I'd made the wrong choice, that no one would believe me. We believe you, Laurel assured her. And now we have insider testimony to go with our evidence. And safety in numbers, Clem added firmly. Rowan wiped her eyes, straightening her shoulders. I have more documentation hidden in my dorm room. Photos, recordings, copies of altered blueprints. I can get them to you tomorrow. No, Hollis said. We'll go with you. No one acts alone anymore. The young woman nodded gratefully, some of the tension leaving her frame. The truth was out now, the burden shared. What had started as a viral moment of public shaming had transformed into something far more purposeful. a deliberate strategy to expose corruption that ran deep into the heart of West Hill. As they began planning their next moves, Hollis caught Rowan watching him with a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. He gave her a reassuring smile, silently renewing his commitment to the cause she'd entrusted him with. Sometimes, he realized, the most important moments of our lives come disguised as simple choices between right and wrong. Laurel's cramped radio booth at the campus station hummed with purpose. As she hunched over her audio equipment, her fingers moved deftly across the mixing board while Hollis, Clem, and Rowan gathered around her small desk, their faces illuminated by the glow of computer screens. "We need to be smart about this," Laurel said, adjusting her headphones. "One segment isn't enough. We need concrete evidence that even Kincaid's lawyers can't dispute." Hollis nodded, his arms crossed as he leaned against the wall. "The construction site might have what we need. Those support beams Clem mentioned, if we can document the substandard materials. I can help," Rowan offered quietly. "I know where. The night security gaps are from doing masked appearances at the stadium." Clem tapped his cane thoughtfully on the floor. "The northeast corner, by the old maintenance shed. That's where they store the documentation trailers." Laurel's eyes lit up as she finished editing a soundbite. "Perfect. I can have the first segment ready for tomorrow morning's broadcast. Just enough to get people asking questions, while you gather the proof we need." The group spent the next hour planning their moves. Laurel crafted her radio piece carefully, weaving together snippets of Rowan's testimony with carefully worded questions about the stadium expansion project. Meanwhile, Hollis and Rowan mapped out the best approach to the construction site, using blueprints Clem had kept from his inspector days. As evening approached, Hollis offered to drive Clem home. The older man was looking tired after hours of planning, though his eyes still sparked with determination. They walked through the nearly empty campus parking garage, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. "You know," Clem said as they walked, "I've been fighting people like Kincaid for 40 years. Never thought I'd see young folks take up the cause like this." Hollis smiled. "Sometimes doing the right thing just finds you, I guess." The screech of tires cut through their conversation. A massive black pickup truck roared up the garage ramp, its engine growling. Hollis's heart jumped as the vehicle accelerated toward them, headlights blazing. "Clem, move." Hollis grabbed the older man's arm, pulling him behind a concrete pillar just as the truck thundered past, close enough to feel the rush of air. The vehicle screeched to a halt, blocking their path to Hollis's car. A heavy-set man with scarred forearms stepped out, his boots hitting the concrete with ominous thuds. Buck Talbot, Kincaid's notorious enforcer, smiled without warmth. "Evening, gentlemen," Buck called out, his voice echoing in the garage. "Seems like you've been poking your noses where they don't belong." Hollis positioned himself between Buck and Clem, his heart pounding, but his voice steady. "We're just heading home, Buck. No trouble here." "That's not what I hear." Buck took a step forward, his massive frame casting a long shadow. "Word is you're planning some kind of expose. Miss Kincaid thinks you might want to reconsider that idea." Clem's cane tapped the concrete as he moved to stand beside Hollis. "You tell Diana that intimidation didn't work on me 30 years ago, and it won't work now." Buck's face darkened. "This ain't 30 years ago, old man." He turned back toward his truck, then paused. "Shame if something happened to either of you. Parking garages can be dangerous places." The truck's engine roared to life. Buck reversed sharply, the tires squealing as he turned the vehicle toward them again. Hollis saw the murderous intent in Buck's eyes through the windshield. "Run," Hollis shouted, grabbing Clem's arm. They barely made it behind a row of parked cars as Buck's truck accelerated past, missing them by inches. The vehicle fishtailed around the garage's corner, tires smoking, then disappeared down the exit ramp with a final engine growl. Hollis helped Clem steady himself, both men breathing hard. The older man's face was pale, but his jaw was set with determination. "You okay?" Hollis asked, his own hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. Clem nodded grimly. "Takes more than a thug in a truck to scare me off." But Hollis, he gripped the younger man's arm. "This proves how far they'll go to keep us quiet. We're not just fighting corruption anymore. We're fighting for our lives." "All the more reason to expose them," Hollis replied, his voice firm despite his racing heart. "We can't let them think this kind of threat works." They waited several minutes to ensure Buck was gone before making their way cautiously to Hollis's car. As they drove away from campus, both men knew the stakes had changed. What had started as a simple act of kindness on a bus had escalated into a life-or-death struggle against powerful forces willing to kill to protect their secrets. The parking garage incident left no doubt their investigation had struck a nerve, and Diana Kincaid was desperate enough to resort to violence. But rather than cow them into silence, Buck's attempt on their lives only strengthened their resolve to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The morning after Buck's parking garage attack, the team gathered in Laurel's tiny radio studio office. The space felt cramped but safe, tucked away in the basement of the communications building where few people ventured. Coffee cups and scattered papers covered every surface. As they processed their latest discoveries, Rowan paced nervously, her athletic frame tense as she pulled up emails on her phone. "I finally got access to the Booster Club's private messages," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Look at this thread between Coach Merrick and the equipment manager." Hollis leaned in to read the screen. The emails detailed coordinated deliveries, innocent-looking equipment bags loaded with prescription pills, transported in team vans during away games. The operation was carefully coded but clear. Special supplies moved across state lines. Under the cover of athletic events, they're using student-athletes as drug mules, Rowan explained. Disgust clear in her voice. The pills get distributed at every game. That's why they needed me. The mascot costume was perfect for making exchanges look innocent. Clem sat heavily in Laurel's desk chair, his weathered face grave. But that's not even the worst of it. He pulled out a thick roll of blueprints from his battered leather briefcase. His hands trembled slightly as he spread them across the desk. "These are the original stadium plans," he explained, pointing to detailed structural diagrams. "I kept copies from my inspector days. Compare them to what Kincaid's actually building." The team huddled around as Clem highlighted the differences. Where the original plans called for deep support pillars and reinforced concrete, Kincaid had substituted cheaper materials. Critical safety features were missing or modified to cut cost. "The new bleacher sections won't hold under full capacity," Clem said, his voice heavy with concern. "The steel's too thin. The concrete mix is substandard." At thousands of fans jumping and cheering, he shook his head grimly. "Homecoming's in 3 weeks," Laurel said quietly. "The stadium will be packed." The weight of this revelation settled over the room. Hollis felt his chest tighten as he imagined the scenario, excited fans filling those compromised bleachers, unaware of the danger above them. "This isn't just about exposing corruption anymore," Hollis said, breaking the tense silence. "We're talking about preventing a disaster. If those sections fail during the game, people will die," Clem finished grimly. "Hundreds, maybe thousands." Rowan sank into a chair, her face pale. "I knew Kincaid was cutting corners to fund Merrick's drug operation, but this," she gestured at the blueprints, "this is murder waiting to happen." Hollis studied the structural diagrams, his mind racing. The simple cook who'd stood up for an old man on a bus now faced a choice that could affect countless lives. The scope of their fight had expanded far beyond what any of them had imagined. "We need to move fast," Laurel said, her producer's instincts kicking in. "The evidence has to be rock solid. If we make accusations this big without proof, they'll bury us," Clem agreed, "and the danger will remain." Hollis straightened up, determination replacing his initial shock. "Then we get proof. Rowan's emails show the drug connection. Clem's plans prove the structural dangers. We just need current photos and samples from the construction site to confirm the substandard materials." "That's incredibly dangerous," Laurel protested. "After what Buck did in the parking garage. More dangerous than letting thousands of people walk into a death trap," Hollis countered quietly. The others fell silent, acknowledging the truth in his words. They spent the next hour planning their next moves, the gravity of their mission lending urgency to every decision. This was no longer just about exposing corruption or seeking justice. They were racing against time to prevent a tragedy. As they worked, Hollis caught Clem watching him with a mixture of pride and concern. The older man had spent his career trying to prevent exactly this kind of disaster. Now, in his retirement, he was fighting the same battle with higher stakes than ever before. The drug operation was bad enough, exploiting students, endangering lives with illegal prescriptions. But the stadium's shortcuts represented a new level of corporate greed and disregard for human life. Diana Kincaid's desire for profit had created a ticking time bomb, set to explode on what should have been a day of celebration. The team's determination grew with each new detail they uncovered. The evidence painted a clear picture, documentation of materials far below safety standards, inspection reports falsified, safety concerns ignored or buried. Behind it all loomed the figure of Diana Kincaid, willing to risk thousands of lives to keep her corrupt empire running. The stadium loomed against the dark sky like a sleeping giant, its partially completed renovations creating strange shadows in the moonlight. Hollis checked his watch, 11:37 p.m. His heart hammered against his ribs as he and Rowan crouched behind a stack of construction materials near the east entrance. "Security makes rounds every 20 minutes, Rowan whispered, adjusting her backpack filled with camera equipment. We have a small window between shifts. Hollis nodded, trying to steady his trembling hands. He wasn't built for this kind of thing. He was a cook, not a spy. But the memory of Buck's truck bearing down on Clem steeled his resolve. They had to stop this before someone got hurt. Ready? He asked. Rowan pulled out her phone and typed a quick message to Laurel. Going in now. Start prep. She gave Hollis a determined nod. They moved swiftly through the shadows, using Rowan's intimate knowledge of the stadium layout to avoid the security cameras. The construction site was eerily quiet except for the occasional creak of metal and whisper of wind. Through tarps, here, Rowan breathed, pointing to a stack of crates partially hidden under a tarp. These weren't on any official manifest. Hollis helped her pull back the heavy plastic while she filmed with her phone. The moonlight revealed boxes marked with pharmaceutical labels, the same ones from the photos in the flash drive. His stomach churned at the sight. Keep filming, he whispered, carefully prying open one crate with a crowbar they brought. Inside, nested in foam padding, were dozens of pill bottles with labels that didn't match their contents. Evidence 1, Rowan narrated, quietly into her phone. Unauthorized pharmaceutical shipments hidden in construction materials. They moved deeper into the stadium's skeleton. Hollis felt exposed on the partially finished upper deck, but Rowan insisted they needed to document the structural issues. She pointed out bolt patterns that didn't match the original plans, filming while Hollis held up his phone's flashlight. See these? She gestured to a row of support beams. They're using grade 3 bolts where the specs required grade 8. The whole section could collapse under full capacity weight. Hollis's hands shook as he helped her get close-up footage. Thousands of fans would sit here during homecoming, completely unaware of the danger above their heads. Back in her campus radio booth, Laurel was preparing for the most important broadcast of her life. She'd spent hours crafting a perfect script to present their evidence. Her hands flew over the control board, setting up the emergency broadcast override they discovered in the station's old equipment manual. Her phone buzzed with another message from Rowan. Footage incoming. Multiple violations confirmed. Laurel's heart raced as she began uploading the video files to multiple secure servers. She'd learned from her journalism classes, always have backups of the evidence at the stadium. Hollis and Rowan were documenting their final piece of evidence when a beam of light swept across the construction site below. Security, Rowan hissed, pulling Hollis behind a stack of lumber. They held their breath as footsteps echoed through the structure. The guard's flashlight beam danced across their hiding spot, but didn't linger. After what felt like hours, the footsteps faded. That was too close, Hollis whispered, his heart pounding. But we got what we needed, Rowan replied, checking her phone to confirm all the footage had sent successfully. They made their way back down through the skeleton of steel and concrete, every shadow making them jump. As they reached the ground level, Rowan's phone lit up with a message from Laurel, files received. Broadcasting in 5 minutes, they sprinted to Rowan's car parked blocks away, not daring to speak until they were safely inside. As they caught their breath, Laurel's voice came through the car radio, strong and clear. This is an emergency broadcast from WCAM Student Radio. Tonight, we bring you explosive evidence of corruption and criminal negligence at the highest levels of university administration. Hollis closed his eyes, letting out a shaky breath. For the first time since this all began, he felt a flutter of hope in his chest. The truth was finally coming out. We did it, Rowan whispered, gripping his arm. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. They can't ignore this now. They sat in the car, listening as Laurel methodically presented their evidence to the world. Her voice never wavered as she detailed the drug smuggling operation, the construction fraud, and the imminent danger to public safety. The files and footage you're hearing about are being uploaded to multiple news outlets and law enforcement agencies as we speak, Laurel continued. These aren't just accusations. They're documented proof of criminal activity. That puts thousands of lives at risk. Hollis felt a weight lift from his shoulders. After weeks of being dismissed, threatened, and attacked, they finally had their moment. The truth was out there, impossible to deny or sweep under the rug. The radio broadcast continued, but Hollis barely heard it. His mind was already racing ahead to what would come next. They'd won this battle, but something told him the war was far from over. Through his exhaustion, a spark of pride flickered in his chest. They'd done what needed to be done. Whatever came next. At least they'd fought back. At least they'd tried. To make things right. The initial rush of success evaporated in an instant. Buck Talbot's massive frame emerged from behind a support beam, his scarred forearms flexing as he advanced on Hollis and Rowan, before either could react. 2 more men in construction vests flanked them. Thought you were clever, didn't you? Talbot's gravelly voice carried a hint of amusement. sneaking around with your little camera. Hollis instinctively stepped in front of Rowan, his mind racing for an escape route. But Talbot's men were already moving, herding them deeper under the bleachers where metal struts created a maze of shadows. Please. Rowan's voice shook. People need to know about the safety violations. Someone could get hurt. Talbot laughed, the sound echoing off concrete and steel. That's the point, sweetheart. Can't have you two running your mouths about what you've seen. What you've seen. With brutal efficiency, they were forced through a maintenance door into a cramped storage space beneath the stadium seats. The door clanged shut with finality, followed by the grinding sound of a heavy lock sliding into place. Enjoy your private viewing spot for the pep rally, Talbot called through the door. Don't worry, the smoke will probably get you before the fire does. Hollis threw himself against the door, but it wouldn't budge. The space was barely 10 feet square, cluttered with old equipment and cleaning supplies. Above them, they could hear the first sounds of crowds gathering for the evening pep rally. No, Rowan whispered, pressing against the walls. We're trapped. The first wisps of smoke began curling under the door. Hollis's throat tightened, not just from fear, but from the acrid smell of burning accelerant. Talbot wasn't bluffing. Help! Rowan screamed, pounding on the walls. Somebody help us. But the growing noise of the crowd above drowned out their voices. The smoke thickened rapidly. Hollis pulled his shirt over his nose, fighting down panic as he searched desperately for another way out. The walls were solid concrete, the ceiling a massive steel supports. They were in a perfect death trap. Get down, he told Rowan, his voice hoarse. Stay low where the air is clearer. They crouched together as the smoke continued to pour in. The heat was building, and Hollis could hear the crackle of flames somewhere beyond the door. His chest constricted, not just from the smoke, but from the crushing weight of helplessness. All his efforts to do the right thing had led them here, trapped like rats while a crowd of innocent people gathered above, unaware of the danger. Just when despair threatened to overwhelm him, they heard a familiar voice through the wall. Hollis. Rowan. It was Clem, his words punctuated by coughing. Clem, Hollis called back. We're locked in. There's a fire. I know, son. Stand back from the east wall. There's a maintenance hatch. It's rusted shut, but I think I can force it. They heard scraping and groaning metal, then a series of sharp impacts. Clem was using his full weight despite his age and bad leg, throwing himself against the hatch again and again. The smoke was getting unbearable. Rowan had started coughing uncontrollably, and Hollis's eyes burned. He could barely see across the small space anymore. With a final crash and the screech of tearing metal, a rectangular section of wall burst inward. Clem's weathered face appeared in the opening, streaked with sweat and soot. Come on, he wheezed. Quickly, Hollis helped Rowan through first, then started to follow. He turned back when he heard Clem grunt in pain. The older man had collapsed against the wall, his bad leg giving out. The effort of breaking through had completely drained him. Leave me, Clem gasped. Get her to safety. Not a chance, Hollis said firmly. Despite his own fear and exhaustion, he pulled Clem's arm over his shoulders. Together they stumbled through the maintenance tunnels as the fire roared behind them. The smoke followed them, but Hollis refused to let go. His legs trembled with every step. His lungs screamed for clean air. But he wouldn't abandon the man who had just saved their lives. Above them, they could hear the crowd cheering, completely unaware of the drama unfolding beneath their feet. This was what true powerlessness felt like, Hollis realized. Not just being trapped, but knowing that others were in danger and being unable to warn them. The weight of that responsibility pressed down harder than Clem's arm across his shoulders. They finally emerged into the cool night air through Serba's exit, all three collapsing onto the grass as they gulped in precious oxygen. In the distance, fire truck sirens began to wail. The ordeal had lasted less than 15 minutes, but Hollis knew he would never forget those moments of utter helplessness. They were alive, but Talbot's message was clear. He would stop at nothing to keep them quiet, even if it meant murder. Smoke stung Hollis's eyes as he stumbled through the hazy darkness beneath the bleachers. The acrid smell of burning plastic and would fill his lungs. Around him, he could hear the creaking of metal and the distant roar of the pep rally crowd above. Completely unaware of the danger below, his heart pounded against his ribs. For a moment, that old familiar fear threatened to paralyze him, the same helplessness he'd felt so many times before. But this time was different. Lives were at stake. We need to warn them. He croaked through the smoke, grabbing Rowan's arm. All those people up there. The fire alarm control panel gleamed dully on the wall ahead. Without hesitation, Hollis smashed the glass with his elbow and yanked the lever down. Instantly, piercing sirens began to wail throughout the stadium complex. The sound of confused murmuring from above quickly turned to shouts of alarm. The emergency exits, Rowan coughed, pointing toward the sealed doors. They're locked. Hollis spotted a maintenance cart nearby. With a grunt, he pushed it forward, gaining speed until it crashed into the exit door mechanism. The impact sent pain shooting up his arms, but the door burst open with a satisfying crack. Fresh air rushed in as students began pouring down the stairs from above. This way. Hollis shouted, waving people toward the exit. Stay calm. Keep moving, he knew triggering the alarm would make him a target. Security cameras would show him breaking the glass, damaging property. But he couldn't let fear of consequences stop him from doing what needed to be done. The crowd streamed past in a panic. Hollis stayed by the door, helping those who stumbled, keeping the flow of people moving. Through the chaos, a flash of movement caught his eye. Buck Talbot clutching the damning ledger, trying to slip away unnoticed through a service corridor. Keep them moving, Hollis yelled to Rowan. Then he plunged after Talbot. The service corridor was filling with smoke, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Hollis's lungs burned as he ran, following the sound of Talbot's heavy footsteps. The corridor opened into a maintenance concourse, a long walkway with a sheer drop on one side. It's over, Talbot, Hollis called out, his voice rough from the smoke. You can't hide what's happening here anymore. Talbot spun around, his face twisted with rage and desperation. You stupid cook, he snarled. You have no idea what you're messing with. He charged at Hollis like a bull, swinging wild punches. Hollis managed to dodge the first few, but a heavy blow caught him in the ribs, driving the air from his lungs. They grappled in the smoke-filled space, dangerously close to the edge of the drop. Talbot's greater size and strength began to tell. He drove Hollis back step by step, until Hollis could feel empty space behind his heels. The ledger fell from Talbot's grip, sliding toward the edge. With a roar of effort, Talbot gave a final shove, trying to send Hollis over. But Hollis grabbed Talbot's jacket, and suddenly they were both teetering on the brink. Hollis saw real fear flash across Talbot's face as the bigger man started to lose his balance. In that moment, Hollis had a choice. It would be so easy to let go, to let Talbot fall. After everything the man had done, maybe he deserved it. But that wasn't who Hollis was, or who he wanted to be. Instead, Hollis tightened his grip on Talbot's jacket and heaved backward with all his might. They crashed to the floor together, rolling away from the edge. The ledger teetered on the brink, then fell into the smoky depths below. Why? Talbot gasped, staring at Hollis with confusion. You could have let me fall because that's not the answer, Hollis replied between ragged breaths. Not ever. The sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Soon the building would be swarming with firefighters and police. The evidence might be gone, but the truth would come out one way or another. What mattered was that people were safe. All people, even those who didn't deserve saving. Hollis pushed himself to his feet, his body aching. He could hear the last of the crowd evacuating above. The smoke was starting to clear as the ventilation systems kicked in. He had chosen courage over fear, mercy over vengeance. Whatever came next, he could face it knowing he'd stayed true to himself when it mattered most. The morning sun streamed through the hospital window, casting a warm glow across Clem Dwyer's weathered face as he rested in his bed. His granddaughter, Laurel, sat beside him, her laptop open as she monitored the live stream that had captivated the entire city of West Hill. On the screen, police cars with flashing lights surrounded the stadium where just hours ago, chaos had erupted. The camera panned to show Diana Kincaid being led out in handcuffs, her usually impeccable suit wrinkled and her composed facade finally cracking. Behind her, Coach Merrick followed, his team jacket a stark contrast to the silver restraints around his wrist. Breaking news, the reporter announced, following evidence uncovered through an anonymous whistleblower's livestream and broadcast from West Hill Campus Radio. Authorities have confirmed a widespread conspiracy involving construction, fraud, drug trafficking, and attempted murder. Laurel reached over and squeezed her grandfather's hand. We did it, Grandpa. They can't hurt anyone else now. Down the hall, in another room, Hollis Vega sat with Rowan Pike, who was being prepared for transfer to a safe location until the trial. The viral clip that had started it all, the confrontation on the bus, played on the small TV, mounted on the wall. Funny how different it looks now, Rowan said softly. Everyone thought you were the bad guy that day. Hollis shrugged, a small smile playing at his lips. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't look pretty at first. The door opened, and a detective entered, notebook in hand. Mr. Vega, we've just arrested Buck Talbot. He was trying to flee the state, but thanks to the evidence you preserved, he won't be going anywhere except jail. Later that afternoon, Clem called Hollis to his room. Despite the bandages and bruises from the fire, The older man's eyes sparkled with their usual determination. Son, he said, I've been thinking. The city's going to need good inspectors now more than ever. People who can't be bought, who'll stand up for what's right no matter what. He paused, studying Hollis's face. How would you feel about becoming my apprentice? Hollis blinked in surprise. Me? But I'm just a cook. You're the man who saved dozens of lives yesterday, Clem corrected. The man who chose to do what's right even when everyone was against him. That's exactly who we need. A knock at the door interrupted them. Laurel stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. I thought you might need this, she said, handing one to Hollis. Their fingers brushed, and both smiled, a quiet understanding passing between them. The next few days brought a whirlwind of changes. The media reframed the bus incident as the catalyst that had exposed corruption and prevented tragedy. Rowan was safely transferred to a protected facility, where she would continue her studies while helping build the case against Kincaid and Merrick. Hollis found himself approached by people who had once dismissed him, city officials, reporters, even the university dean. But it was the quiet moments that meant the most, sharing coffee with Laurel, in the hospital cafeteria, listening to her plans for future investigative pieces, studying building codes with Clem, knowing that his simple act of standing up for what was right had made a real difference. One evening, as he and Laurel walked through the hospital garden, she stopped and turned to him. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just this quiet guy who worked at a diner. I had no idea you'd turn out to be the bravest person I've ever known. Hollis felt his cheeks warm. I'm still that quiet guy, he said. I just couldn't stand by and do nothing. That's exactly what makes you special, she replied, taking his hand. Above them, the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, promising a new chapter in a life that had found its purpose. The city buzzed with the news of the indictments. Diana Kincaid and Harlan Merrick faced multiple charges, their carefully constructed world of influence crumbling under the weight of evidence. The stadium would be rebuilt properly, this time with genuine oversight and transparent processes. But for Hollis, the greatest change was internal. As he sat with Clem, reviewing inspection protocols and safety regulations, he realized he had found more than justice. He had found his calling. The man who had once felt invisible had discovered his worth not in grand gestures, but in the simple courage to stand up for what was right. And when Laurel leaned her head on his shoulder, during their evening visits to Clem's room, he knew he had found something else too. A connection built on shared values and quiet strength, blooming slowly but surely into something beautiful. The story that had begun with a confrontation on a bus had transformed into something much larger. A testament to the power of ordinary people choosing to do extraordinary things, and the kind of love, for justice, for others, for truth, that changes lives forever. If this story found you at the right moment, subscribe and stay close. Tomorrow's may be the reminder you didn't know you needed.